Hello, it's me, the editor, and I had a bit of a problem because I recorded this speed paint and then I actually didn't save the file, so now all I have is the speed paint, so I just had to take the image from that, and it's really low quality, so that sucks. Clap. Hello, my fellow degenerates. Would you look at that? I actually made another one of these instead of just abandoning this idea like I usually do, so love that. I'm recording this on the same day that I uploaded the first video in this series, so I don't even know if you guys actually like this kind of stuff or not because I have very little reception to go off of so far, but I do not care. I'm having fun and frick you and that's that. Anyways, today our guinea pig is Russia. You know that huge heckin' country that recruited beluga whales to spy on other people? Yeah, that one. So, Russia's kind of a jerk. Let's just get that out of the way. He acts pretty cold. You see, it's funny because Russia's cold and... Okay. He acts very unfriendly towards most other countries, some more than others, and he isn't really very trusting of other people. His best friends are probably Belarus and Kazakhstan, who are his siblings, but, he doesn't really enjoy socializing. He gets along with India pretty well, and she is often, inadvertently put in a position where she needs to be, the mediator and stop Russia and America from arguing. As for China, they have kind of a rocky relationship, but for the most part, their mutual hatred of NATO and its member states bonds them together. When it comes to America, oi. There was a time where they got along pretty well for the most part at the end of the Cold War, when the Soviet Union was like, adios, kiddos, and then he died. Pog. Nowadays, they, kind of act like they hate each other and generally don't get along, but secretly find each other somewhat amusing. No homo, though, right, guys? Right? Anyways, in all seriousness, they do have this, weird rivalry that's mostly just a narrative for them to go along with so they feel like they have competition or something. So, another clap that you couldn't see. History time. Russia had a wonderful childhood with a supportive father. No, he didn't. Like any traditional edgelord, he had a pretty shit upbringing. His father, the Soviet Onion— I just fucking said onion by accident. That wasn't in the script. Shit. His father, the Soviet Union, was an absolute jackass. He was very neglectful of all of his children, and even though Russia experienced this to a degree no child should ever have to experience, he was definitely favored more so by his father than he favored his other children. He picked and chose favorite children to treat better than others because he has no ounce of goodness in his entire being at this point. So Russia was definitely his favorite, and he treated him much better than, say, Ukraine, who was arguably treated the worst. During the Great Depression, the Soviet mainly focused on making sure he was the most comfortable, but Russia kinda got a part of this. He felt guilty about it, but he was genuinely just too scared of his father to say anything. He'd seen what he can do, and he wasn't gonna put himself in that position. Then his father meets a certain, German jackass, and everything honestly gets worse from there because the Soviet Union starts focusing even more on military expansion than his children, who he already kind of treated like shit, but I bet you can't guess what happens next. The German jackass betrays him. Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus are attacked and they get pretty badly hurt in the initial wave. Here, Russia sees, a tiny shift in his father's behavior. He's pissed at the German— I'm not even using his name, I'm just calling him the German jackass, and I'm gonna keep that up because it's funny. He's pissed at the German jackass for hurting his children, and though he kind of begins to realize that he actually loves his children, it doesn't stop the abuse. He's incredibly upset and takes his anger out on his children, and at the same time becomes, extremely overbearing to an unhealthy extent because he doesn't want anyone to hurt them. Oh, but he gets a free pass when he's doing it because, he has no soul. Anyways, Russia joins the war effort and kind of becomes Soviet's right-hand man. He was already the favorite child, so this was just blatant nepotism, but, whatever. The bad German man was pushed back enough to the point where Russia and his siblings were no longer in harm's way and they were able to kind of relax a bit. The war ends and Soviet comes back to Moscow. By the way, I have a headcanon that all the countries and sometimes their children live in their capital cities. Soviet kind of forces children to live in Moscow instead of their own respective states because, again, he was very overbearing and wanted to keep them under his thumb at all times. But anyways, as I was saying, he comes back to Moscow and he's extremely dejected, I guess. From this point, he acts less openly violent towards his children and more so just gives them the cold shoulder. Another low temperature pun right there. But this was honestly probably because now he had East Germany to be his living punching bag. Oh my god, that was horrible, but you know what I mean. This video is a mess, Jesus Christ. During the Cold War, Russia is basically raised solely on anti-American and anti-West propaganda in general, and he bought into this more so than his other siblings. His home life with the Soviet Union... I did it again, god damn it, and my dog is barking. This is so unprofessional. I'm really trying here. Just give me a moment. Okay, I think I've calmed down enough to continue this video. His home life with the Soviet Union began to improve a tiny bit as years went by, and he kind of, calmed down. He wasn't a good father, and he was still very strict, but he was at least trying to be a little bit better. Anyhow, Russia still wasn't being raised in a great environment, and that was just something he had to live with. He sometimes was able to interact with the Eastern Bloc states, but Soviet tried to keep a distance between them and his children, especially with East Germany. He didn't want his children to be around them, and Russia, for the most part, complied with the unspoken rules more so than some of his siblings, but, he wouldn't rat them out or anything. Things kind of turned upside down after the Chernobyl nuclear accident in 1986, which I'll discuss extensively if I ever do a video about the Soviet Union, because as stated before, I have a heck ton of headcanons for him. But the main takeaway is that he's like, oh shit, my children got hurt, and it was kind of my fault. Maybe I should be a less shitty father and a less shitty person in general. Everything calmed down a lot more, and Russia and his siblings were slowly given more and more freedom, and Soviet genuinely started to show that he cared about his children. Wholesome, yay! Kind of. It was this, though, that led to the fall of the Soviet Union. Russia wasn't too concerned when the Baltic states left, as he knew that the three of them never really felt like they belonged there. And in all fairness, they were taken advantage of. I mean, the Soviet states were all taken advantage of, but, the Baltics were forced to join after Soviet invaded Poland and all that, if that makes sense. But anyways, it was when Ukraine left that he really realized what was happening, and despite everything, he was scared. He kind of wanted to take charge of his own country, but, at the same time, he didn't want his father to literally die. They'd gotten a lot closer in the last couple of years, and even if they hadn't, Russia felt a loyalty towards him despite how he was treated in the past. So I wrote a little thingy about this a while ago, and it's super cringe, and holy mother of God, I can't believe I'm sharing my Countryhumans fanfiction I've written with the world on YouTube, but, I have it laying around, and I made a post about this, and you guys voted for it, and this is a democracy, and I don't like the Electoral College, so I'm not going to override your vote. But, if you're one of my parents, I'd be very comfortable with you deciding to stop watching this video here, because this is low-key embarrassing. Yay. Russia could feel his chest getting tight with emotion when his father came home from whatever diplomacy crap was happening. He looked even worse. Hello, Russia, the Soviet Union greeted. He looked exhausted and weak, but happy, almost. Content? Is that the right word? Hey, he mumbled half-heartedly, his attention drifting to the cracks that covered his father's body. They started appearing after Ukraine left the USSR, and since then they'd only gotten worse. It looked like he had some weird-ass skin condition, but God, he wished it was only a skin condition. Soviet's eyes softened with concern. Are you okay? He asked. He didn't know how to respond to that. Looking at his father again, he felt another pang of guilt. Maybe he shouldn't have left. Maybe he should have just stayed. I know that look, he said softly. Don't feel bad, Russia. Hanging on to that guilt doesn't get you anywhere. He smiled sympathetically, but there was something behind it that he couldn't really identify. But if Kazakhstan leaves... He trailed off, shaking his head in a fruitless attempt to reassure himself. No, Kazakhstan won't leave. It'll be fine, right? He was silent. He won't leave, right? Russia asked again, his voice getting smaller. Russia, the taller country said after a moment. I don't want you to blame him. Promise me that you won't blame him. His heart sank. He left? He nodded. He left. And that's okay. I still have a week or so. A week or so? He interrupted, staring at his father in shock. You're gonna die. Aren't you at all bothered by that? He shrugged. I'm just hoping there isn't a hell, he chuckled tiredly. But if there is, that's probably where I'm going. On the bright side, I suppose I get to see some old friends. There was a wistful glimmer in his yellow eyes, which scared Russia even more. He didn't like hearing his father talk about death. Number one, it would give him an existential crisis, and number two, he obviously didn't want his father dying. Hey, he said, tearing him away from his thoughts. Don't be scared. You'll be fine on your own. You'll do great. I know you'll make the country better than I would ever be able to. You're smart and you're strong. You'll make things even better. The praise made him even more terrified. How would he live up to his father's legacy? Well, he supposed that maybe it wasn't a legacy he wanted to live up to. Certain parts of it, anyway. But he wanted to be just as powerful. He wanted to be just as strong. He wanted to be kind to his people, too, but look where it got his father. But whatever you do, Soviet continued, a hint of amusement in his voice, don't go on and continue my imaginary war with America, okay? He laughed softly. But it's not your fault, he said, ignoring Russia's quiet interjection. You need to cooperate with him after I'm gone. And China, too. Treat them with respect, and be their friend. Be there for them. Please. Soviet looked away for a moment, a shadow of regret flickering in his golden eyes. Make up for how I've treated them. Time skip, crab rave. I'm fucking dying. It had been a week since Soviet had fallen. That Christmas was a dark one. Not that Russia and his siblings had ever really been allowed to celebrate Christmas up until their father's recent reforms, but the fact that it happened on what was supposed to be the happiest time of the year or whatever hurt even more. It was just rubbing salt in the wound. America put a gentle hand on Russia's shoulder. Are you all right? He asked. He blinked, shaking himself out of his thoughts. He'd forgotten that this was the end of a United Nations meeting and he was probably supposed to be packing up his shit by now. Are you okay? America asked again. He debated himself on whether he should just open up to him or not. On one hand, it would be nice to have someone to talk to. He knew his father had revitalized his friendship with other superpower, and the past was pretty much behind them. On the other, he wasn't entirely sure if he could trust America. Sure, the Cold War had ended, and most of the tension was basically gone now, but he'd been the enemy for so long. It was an awkward situation, to say the least. In addition to that, he didn't want to seem weak in front of the most powerful country in the world. He didn't want to embarrass himself by admitting that he wasn't really in the best mental space. He needed to seem stronger than that. He needed to seem like he could take on anything. It's okay if you don't want to talk about it, he said, bringing Russia's attention back. I understand. But I just want you to know that I'm here for you. I want to continue the positive relations I have with Soviet. I think we could be really great friends. He hesitated. He trailed off, shrinking in on himself a little bit. I understand if you're still bitter towards me. It's not like we can erase what happened. I'm just cautiously optimistic that we can make it better. And part of that starts with trust, America told him. Soviet told me not to trust anybody, he mumbled. And he told you that for a reason, but I think we both know what it was, and it isn't a good one. He nodded. Yeah. Russia, listen, I'm sure you still hold somewhat of a grudge towards me, and that's completely fair. I don't blame you at all for that. He was about to protest when he realized that the other country was kind of right. He sighed. It wasn't really America's fault that his father was gone. He hadn't caused the economic failure. Directly, anyways. He hadn't caused the Baltics to leave. He hadn't caused Ukraine to leave. He came to the realization. This was Ukraine's fault, wasn't it? She was the first large state to leave the Union. He could partially understand the Baltics leaving, and even so, it wasn't like they were a huge, important part of the USSR, but as soon as they left, Ukraine followed. It was then that everyone realized that the Union was falling apart. It was Ukraine's exit that had caused some kind of domino effect, wasn't it? Russia? America's voice grounded him in reality again, and he shook his head as if to clear it. I'm fine, he said, which wasn't really a lie. He knew whose fault this was now. He couldn't believe he hadn't realized it earlier. But now that he knew whose fault it was, he had someone to blame. and somebody to punish. He felt a twinge of guilt at the thought. Ukraine was his sister, and he cared about her, but at the end of the day, she was the reason all of this had gone wrong. He couldn't simply forgive her for that. Yeah, that's the end of that. Shit, that was really, cringy and garbage, and yeah, there's your angst. So the point of that little excerpt is basically that he comes to this conclusion that Ukraine is primarily at fault for everything, and he becomes really hostile towards her. Eventually he goes as far as to invade Crimea, mostly to scare her, and his relations with America hit another low point. So Russia's basically an angry jerk who's kind of miserable, but that also doesn't excuse him from being an asshole. That's that for this video because I'm tired and I want to take a nap, but I hope you found my voice tolerable.